The Risk of Growing Up Faster Than Your Own Soul. Nikola Tesla. It was on a night of electrical storm in 1895 that he realized it was not a scientific insight, it was a collapse. Nikola Tesla was alone in the laboratory when his body began to shake involuntarily. It wasn't fear, it wasn't tiredness. It was as if something inside him was disconnecting, as if his mind had advanced so far that his heart simply couldn't keep up. He looked at his hands and didn't recognize them. He felt his pulse racing, but his chest was empty. He had just designed a system that would change the entire world. Alternating current was already being installed in cities. His mind was shining faster than any machine. But there, at that moment, he didn't know who he was. Tesla fell to his knees, not because I was exhausted, but because for the first time, he understood that there was a price that no one talks about, a price he hadn't even realized he was paying. He had grown up too fast, and his soul was left behind. Take a deep breath, because what I'm going to tell you now is not just about Tesla, it's about you, about anyone who has ever felt like they are evolving too quickly, achieving things that the world applauds, but inside there is an emptiness that no one sees, a mismatch, a feeling that you are not present in your own life. Tesla called this energetic misalignment, but the truth is much more disturbing. And that night he wrote something that was never published, a personal diary that only came to light decades later, hidden among burned papers and documents confiscated by the government. The sentence was simple, but it carried an unbearable weight. I created the future, but I lost the present. There was no pride in those words. There was lamentation. There was the consciousness of a man who had touched the laws of the universe, but forgot to touch humanity itself. He wrote further, "When you move too quickly toward tomorrow, something inside you gets stuck in yesterday, and that something is your soul." Tesla knew he was paying an invisible price. He saw the world in frequencies that no one else did. He felt magnetic fields before measuring them. He understood electricity as if it were a living language. But I couldn't feel joy. I couldn't sleep without nightmares. I couldn't connect with anyone without feeling like I was lying about who I really was. He had grown up too fast, and now he was paying. But here's what no one tells you. This doesn't just happen to geniuses. It happens to anyone who runs after success, recognition, evolution, without stopping to feel, without stopping to breathe, without stopping to ask, do I still recognize myself? Have you ever felt this? That feeling of conquering everything but feeling nothing, of being rising, but inside, falling. Tesla discovered something that night, something that science cannot explain, but that energy proves. When you grow faster than your soul can integrate, you do not become more powerful. You become fragmented, and fragmentation is the beginning of collapse. He got up from the floor. He looked at the surrounding equipment. Everything worked perfectly. Everything sparkled. But he was out. It was then that Tesla made a decision. It wasn't rational. It was instinctive. He turned everything off. All machines, all lights, and he stayed there, in the dark, in absolute silence. It wasn't meditation. It was despair. It was the attempt of a man who had mastered external electricity, but lost contact with internal electricity. The one that beats in the heart, that lights up the eyes, that makes you feel like you are alive. And it was in the silence that he heard it, not a voice, but a vibration, something old, something that had always been there, but that he had ignored in the race to the top. It was the voice of the soul, and she was whispering, "You don't need to be fast, you need to be whole." Tesla cried. For the first time in years he cried, not out of sadness, but relief, because you finally understand. The universe does not reward speed, it rewards alignment. If what you're feeling right now resonates with something deep inside you, if this story is touching a wound you didn't even know existed, don't let it go. Subscribe to the channel, because what comes next will show you exactly what Tesla did to reconnect with his own soul, and how you can do the same before it's too late. But Tesla didn't know the worst was yet to come, because the real enemy was not outside of him, it was inside, and it had a name that took him years to pronounce out loud: soulless ambition. In the days following that night of collapse, Tesla tried to slow down, tried to reconnect, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw a Project S unfinished. Every time he took a deep breath, he heard voices telling him he was wasting time, that other inventors were moving forward, that the world wouldn't wait for him. The pressure didn't come from outside, it came from inside, and that was even scarier. He realized something disturbing. His mind had become a machine that he no longer knew how to turn off. Tesla started writing everything down, every obsessive thought, every impulse to return to the laboratory, every time I felt guilty for not producing. And when he read his own words, he saw the pattern, saw the antagonist. It wasn't the tiredness, it wasn't the world, It was a part of himself that had learned to survive through speed, a part that believed that stopping was dying, that to rest was to fail. That feeling was weakness. He wrote, "The greatest danger is not growing quickly. It is growing without roots, because when the storm comes, you don't bend, you break," and the storm was coming. It was in March 1895 that everything fell apart once and for all. A fire completely destroyed his laboratory on Fifth Avenue in New York. Years of work, decades of research, unique prototypes. Everything turned to ashes in a matter of hours. The newspapers reported it as a tragedy, but Tesla knew the truth. This was no accident. It was a consequence, not in the physical sense, but in the energetic sense. He had ignored all the signs. He ignored his body asking for rest. He ignored the soul asking for presence. He ignored the intuition that whispered, "You're going too fast." And the universe, in its relentless wisdom, forced a stop. Tesla stood in front of the ruins. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. Just looked. And in that moment, something inside him broke in a different way. It wasn't desperation. It was surrender. For once, he didn't try to rebuild right away. He didn't run after investors. He didn't make frantic plans. He just stopped. And in the silence of that forced pause, the truth began to emerge. And Tesla realized that there were two versions of himself. One that the world saw, the brilliant genius, the unstoppable inventor, the man who never slept, and another that no one saw, the scared boy who believed his value was only in what he produced. This second version was the real antagonist. It wasn't bad, but I was scared, afraid that if he stopped, it would stop mattering. Fear that if he showed vulnerability, he would be discarded. Fear that its essence, without the inventions, without the shine, without the speed, wouldn't be enough. And that fear had created a destructive pattern. Growing up not to feel, every project was an escape, every invention, a distraction, each achievement, a way to avoid looking inside and facing the question he feared most. Who am I when I'm not creating? The answer was scary because he didn't know. He had spent so long being what the world expected that he forgot who he was before all this started. It was then that Tesla did something he had never done before. He sought help, not from scientists, not from investors, but from an old friend he had abandoned years ago, a poet named Samuel, who lived in an isolated cabin in the mountains. Samuel didn't understand electricity. I didn't understand physics, but he understood the soul. And when Tesla arrived at his door, destroyed, Samuel offered no solutions. It offered something much rarer, presence. They were silent for hours, just sitting, looking at the fire. And it was Samuel who finally said, "Tesla, you built machines that light up the world, but you forgot to light up yourself." Those words pierced something deep, because they were true, painfully true. Samuel continued, "You know what's wrong with growing up too fast? You leave parts of yourself behind, and those parts don't go away. They scream in the dark, waiting for you to come back and get them." Tesla felt a lump in his throat, because I knew exactly which parts I had left behind. The child who played in nature, the young man who daydreamed, the man who believed that life was more than achievements. All of these versions were stuck somewhere in the past, waiting. And until he returned to integrate them, he would continue to be fragmented. It would remain empty. It would continue to grow, but never be whole. Samuel got up and brought a strange object, a small crystal that refracted light in all directions. "See this," he said. "When light passes through something whole, it multiplies. But when it passes through something broken, it disperses. You are dispersing your own light, Tesla, not because it is weak, but because it is fragmented." Tesla held the crystal. He saw the reflections dancing on the walls, and for the first time, he understood what he needed to do. It wasn't slowing down for the sake of slowing down. It wasn't stopping just to stop. It was time to go back to look for the parts he had left behind. Return to reconnect with the essence he abandoned in the race to the top. But how? How do you come back when the whole world expects you to move on? And that's when Samuel revealed something that would change everything. Something Tesla had never considered. Something that sounded absurd to such a scientific mind, but that, somehow, made perfect sense. You don't need to go back in time, Tesla. You need to go back inside, because all the versions of you are still alive. They are waiting in the only place where time doesn't exist, in the frequency of your own soul. Tesla looked at his friend. Part of him wanted to laugh. Part of him wanted to dismiss it as baseless mysticism. But there was a part, small, scared, but present, that knew it was true. Tesla returned to New York different, not visibly. On the outside, he was still the same serious man, with a penetrating gaze and an upright posture. But inside, something had changed. He had made a decision that went against everything the world expected of him. He was going to do the unthinkable. He was going to stop growing to learn to exist. But I couldn't tell anyone. Investors wouldn't understand. The press would mock. The scientific world would dismiss him as someone who had gone mad after the fire. So Tesla did something he had never done before. He kept it a secret. Publicly, he continued working, accepted new projects. He gave interviews. He maintained the mask of unstoppable genius. But in the shadows, away from the eyes of the world, he began a completely different journey. Every night, after turning off the lights in the laboratory, Tesla did something that would be simple for any ordinary person. But for him, it was revolutionary. He stood still. I didn't meditate. I didn't pray. It just stayed. In silence, in the dark, breathing. At first it was unbearable. His mind raced. To-do lists, equations, unfinished projects. The guilt of wasting time was overwhelming. But he persisted, because Samuel had said something that he couldn't get out of his head. The soul does not speak at speed. It speaks in silence. In the third week, something happened. Tesla was sitting on the floor of the empty laboratory when he suddenly saw something. Not with the eyes, but with a part of him that he had forgotten existed. It was an image, a memory. But it wasn't his as an adult. He was a child. He was maybe 6 years old. I was lying in an open field looking at the clouds. I didn't think about anything. It didn't create anything. I didn't need to prove anything. It just existed. And in that moment, in that memory, he was complete. Tesla opened his eyes, panting, heart racing, because he had just found the first lost part of himself. The part that knew being alive wasn't about doing. It was about being. He wrote everything down, drew the scene. He described the feeling. And he realized something disturbing. He had buried this version of himself the moment the world began to expect things from him. When they praised him for the first time. When they said he was special. When success became a condition for love. It was there that he learned to exchange presence for performance. And he never came back. Until now. Tesla created a ritual. He called it the internal reconstruction. It had no scientific basis. It couldn't be measured. It could not be explained in equations. But it worked. Every night, he dedicated an hour to finding a lost part of himself. In the second week, he met the teenager who loved poetry, that he read under the trees, who believed that beauty was as important as logic. Tesla had buried that part when he entered university and realized that dreamers weren't taken seriously. In the third week, he met the young inventor who created out of passion, not recognition, who spent hours experimenting not because he needed to prove something, but because he loved the process. Tesla had lost this when money entered the equation, when investors started demanding results. In the fourth week, he found something that broke him completely. The man who wanted to be loved, not surprised, not revered, just loved for who he was. No need to shine. Without needing to be extraordinary, only human, vulnerable, real. Tesla cried so much that night that he thought he would never stop, because he realized he had spent his entire life trying to be so impressive that no one could reject him. But in the process, it had become so distant that no one could touch it. He had built an armor of genius, and now he was trapped inside her. It was then that Tesla understood the second secret that Samuel had implied. Growing quickly is not the problem. The problem is growing without integration. Each stage of life, each version of yourself, carries a frequency, a wisdom, an essential part of your total ET. When you rush to the next phase without honoring the previous one, you don't evolve, you fragment, and fragmentation creates a void that no external achievement can fill. Tesla realized that he had made the mistake that the entire society makes. He believed that the future was more important than the present, that the next version of him would be better than the current one, that tomorrow's success would be worth today's sacrifice. But the truth was cruel. There is no future version if you are not whole now. He wrote in his diary, "I built towers that touch the sky, but I forgot to build foundations within myself. And now I understand. Without inner roots, any height is a fall waiting to happen." And Tesla then did something radical, something that no scientist at the time would do. He took all the projects he was developing and divided them into two categories. 1. Projects that come from ambition, from ego, fear, the need to prove something. 2. Projects that come from the essence, from genuine curiosity, passion, internal alignment. The ego's list was huge. The essence list had 3 items. Tesla looked at it and felt nauseous, because he realized that he was living 90% of his life on the autopilot of soulless ambition. Only 10% of him was actually present in what he was doing. And that was when he made the scariest decision of his life. He was going to abandon his ego projects, not all at once, not impulsively, but strategically. He was going to start saying no. It would disappoint investors. I would miss opportunities. It would appear less productive in the eyes of the world. But for the first time, it would be whole. Over the next few weeks, something strange started to happen. Tesla noticed that the more he reconnected with the lost parts of himself, the clearer his mind became. Ideas that previously required brutal effort now flowed naturally. The solutions he forced now appeared as spontaneous insights. It was as if, when he slowed down, he had accelerated in a different way. Not the frantic speed of despair, but the fluid speed of the alignment. He noted, "I discovered something that science doesn't measure. When you are fragmented, even success weighs heavily. But when you are whole, even challenge flows." Tesla was getting ready, not for a great invention, not for a moment of glory, but for something much greater, to become the version of himself that he had abandoned along the way. And he knew that if he succeeded, everything would change, not just for him, but for anyone who had the courage to do the same. But the hardest part was still missing. The part that would require courage he didn't know if he had, because reconnecting with yourself was one thing, but showing that version to the world, that was another story entirely. And the world, Tesla knew, does not forgive vulnerability, especially not in geniuses. Everything fell apart one September morning. Tesla was in the office when he received the news. His main investors had met without telling him. They had reached a unanimous conclusion. He was unsteady. Since the fire, his behavior had changed. "I was turning down profitable projects. I was wasting time with reflections that did not generate patents. I was, in their words, stopping being productive." The decision was made. Either Tesla would go back to what it was before, or they would lose interest. They had given an ultimatum. 2 weeks to present something revolutionary, something that justified the investment, something that proved he was still the unstoppable genius. Tesla read the letter 3 times. He felt the familiar pressure rising in his chest. The old voice, the voice of fear, began to scream inside him. "Did you see? Stopping was a mistake. You're losing everything. You need to go back. You need to run. You need to prove it." For a moment, he almost gave in. It almost went back to the old pattern. He almost betrayed everything he had discovered in the last few weeks, because the world was doing exactly what he knew it would do, punishing him for slowing down. But then, something different happened. Tesla closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, and instead of reacting with despair, he asked the question that would change everything. What if I just don't give in? That night, he did not go to the laboratory. He went to the bank of the Hudson River. He stood there, alone, looking at the water, and for the first time in his life, he didn't try to solve the problem. He did not outline strategies. He didn't make plans, just felt it. He felt the fear. He felt the anger. He felt the sadness of realizing that the world only valued him for his production, never for his essence. And in the midst of it all, he felt something he didn't expect: clarity. Because there, in that moment of imminent collapse, Tesla finally understood the full truth. The truth that Samuel had tried to tell, but that only experience could reveal. The universe does not punish those who slow down. It removes those who are not aligned. The I investors weren't rejecting Tesla. The universe was removing that which no longer belonged to its frequency. I was clearing the way. I was creating space for something new, something real, something that didn't depend on masks or performance. And for the first time, instead of fighting it, Tesla decided to trust. Nor 2 days later, he did the unthinkable. A meeting was scheduled with all investors. They expected a performance. They expected prototypes. They expected the usual Tesla: brilliant, strategic, unstoppable. But when he entered the room, he didn't bring any of that. I only brought one letter, and he read it out loud. "Gentlemen, I thank you for your years of support, but I need to be honest with you and with myself. Over the past few months, I discovered something that no equation can measure. I had lost touch with the reason I started inventing. It wasn't for money. It wasn't for recognition. It was because I loved understanding how the universe works. And somewhere along the way, I forgot about it." The silence in the room was deafening. Tesla continued, "I grew up fast, too fast, and I paid a price you don't see. I paid with my soul. I built machines while I became one, and I can't live like that anymore. So I'm here to say, if you want the Tesla that doesn't sleep, that doesn't feel, that produces nonstop, it doesn't exist anymore. But if you want the Tesla that is whole, that creates with genuine passion, that brings innovations that come from a real place, it's before you now." He folded the letter, he placed it on the table, and left. He didn't wait for a response, didn't negotiate, he didn't bow. For the first time in his life, Tesla had chosen integrity over approval. So in the following days, the answer came, and it was devastating. All investors withdrew, all doors closed. The scientific world began to whisper that Tesla had gone mad, that the fire had broken it, that he was no longer trustworthy. In a matter of weeks, Tesla lost everything: funding, credibility, prestige. The man who had lit up the world was left in the dark. Anyone on the outside would say he had made a fatal mistake, that he had thrown everything away, that he should have lied, kept the mask on, held his own. But Tesla, for the first time in years, slept peacefully, because he had done something the world rarely witnesses. He had chosen his soul over success, and the universe, in its silent wisdom, was paying attention. And it was 3 weeks later that the turnaround happened. Tesla was in the small room he rented after losing his laboratory. No equipment, no team, with nothing but a notebook and a pen. And it was there, in that forced void, that something extraordinary happened. He had the clearest vision of life. It didn't come from effort. It didn't come from pressure. It came from the alignment. Because for the first time, your mind, your heart, and your essence were on the same frequency. And when that happens, the impossible becomes inevitable. Tesla saw, with frightening clarity, the project that would change everything. It wasn't just an invention, it was an understanding. A way to transmit energy wirelessly, not just electricity, but pure frequency. Something he could only have conceived while being whole. Because it required a perception that went beyond logic. It required connection with the very essence of the universe. He wrote frantically, not out of desperation, but by genuine inspiration. For the first time, I wasn't creating to prove. I was creating because I couldn't help but create. And then, the second twist, an envelope arrived. No sender. Inside, a handwritten letter. It was Samuel's. It just said, "Tesla, you passed the test. Not the test of men, the test of the universe." He needed to know if you were willing to lose everything to find yourself. Now that you have proven that you are, everything that is rightfully yours will come back, but in a different form, not as a reward for performance, but as a consequence of alignment. You won't have to chase it. The right doors will open on their own, because now you vibrate at the frequency of integrity, and the universe always responds to that frequency. Tesla read the letter with tears in his eyes, because I knew it was true. I could feel it. Something had changed in the invisible field around him. It wasn't blind faith, it was energetic certainty. And in the following days, as if the universe was confirming it, 3 things happened. A new investor appeared, someone who didn't just want profits, but believed in the vision. Someone who said, "I don't invest in machines, I invest in men of integrity." A newspaper published an article not about his inventions, but about his courage, about a genius who had the strength to stop when the world was screaming to follow. And the third was the strangest. Tesla received letters. 10 theirs, from ordinary people, people who had read about him, people who said, "Thank you for showing us that we can choose soul over success. Thank you for proving that slowing down isn't failure, it's realigning." Tesla realized something he had never considered. By saving his own soul, he had given permission for others to do the same. 6 months later, Tesla was standing in front of the Wardenclyffe Tower. It wasn't just a structure, it was the physical manifestation of what he had learned, a tower designed not by blind ambition, but by aligned vision, not built at the speed of despair, but at the pace of integrity. He touched the metal base and felt something he had forgotten, genuine pride. Tesla looked up at the sky and whispered, "It took me longer, but I arrived complete." In the following years, the world continued to accelerate. Other inventors rushed, other geniuses burned and went out quickly. But Tesla had learned, true speed is not that of your feet, it's the soul. He never grew up too fast again. I knew that each phase of life needs to be lived, not just crossed. And as he slowed down, he became more productive than ever, not in quantity, but in quality of presence. His inventions began to have a depth that they didn't have before. One late afternoon, years later, a young inventor came to visit him, bright, hurried, with eyes full of ambition. The young man talked non-stop about projects, deadlines, and how he needed to grow up quickly. Tesla let him talk. When silence arrived, he said, "Do you want to know my biggest regret? It wasn't what I didn't build. It was the time I spent absent from my own life." He looked into the young man's eyes. "You can light up the whole world, but if the light inside you is out, what's the point?" Tesla walked to the window. "The risk of growing faster than your own soul is not that you will fail. It is that you will have piecemeal success." His voice became soft. "The universe does not reward speed. It rewards alignment." The young man hesitated. "But what if I slow down and lose everything?" Tesla smiled. "What if you don't slow down and lose yourself?" When the young man got up to leave, Tesla grabbed him by the shoulder. "Don't be afraid to disappoint others. Be afraid to disappoint who you could have been." Tesla died years later, alone, without fortune. But he died in one piece, and that was worth more than any trophy. Today, his inventions light up the world, but the real light he left is in the lesson: you can grow, but don't grow faster than your soul can keep up. Because the greatest invention is not something that changes the world. It is the version of you that is whole enough to inhabit you. If this story touched something inside you, subscribe to the channel. This message needs to reach those who are shining on the outside while fading on the inside. The greatest revolution is not external, it's internal, and it starts when you ask, am I growing or just running?